I've been under the weather for a couple days, so I was not able to make it here until today. But I was watching on Twitter what was going on. How's it been the last couple of days here at the Conservative Party convention?
It's been real busy. We are treated actually like every other media outlet. In the riser that we're sitting on right now, we're right beside CBC Radio Canada. There's no special treatment for media, which is all we ever ask for.
Right.
We just want to be able to do our job. We've had access to MPs, activists. It's been a very, very busy convention, especially with Tamara Lich here. At her, on a journalistic mission, it's hard for her to actually work because everybody wants to stop, talk to her, thank her, and take their picture with her.
She is turning into a real journalist, but she's also an ambassador for freedom, for civil liberties, for the truckers, and now even for Rebel News. So I couldn't be prouder. And thanks, as our senior chief reporter, thanks for keeping an eye out to help her grow into the great journalist I know she'll become.
Yeah, she was able to sit down with her own MP. She was able to sit down with Andrew Lawton and discuss her time in the Freedom Convoy. He wrote a book about it. He's been really hard on the government in the House of Commons for their violation of civil liberties. We know that was reaffirmed by 3 judges just a couple of weeks ago. Right. So, with that decision being levied against the Liberals, Tamara's been a very popular person here at the convention.
That's right, because I think there were some politicians who were maybe risk averse. Mm-hmm. But now that we know that the actual lawbreakers were the government, it's funny, when I was in Davos last week, I asked both Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland about that. I said, how do you feel about being rebuked again by a 3-judge panel of the Federal Court of Appeal?
That's 4 total.
Yeah, and both of them were avoiding the issue. Neither of them would show any compunction. So I think Tamara Lich's star is continuing to rise. So Rebel has a great deployment here. You're here, Sid Fazard is here, Angelica Toy, Tamara Lich, and I finally made an appearance. Tell me more about the conference itself. Has there been any big battles, any interesting tussles? I mean, we know that the big thing was 87.4% thumbs up for Pierre Poilievre, which I sort of thought he would get.
Right.
Some of the media were implying that he was in trouble. They don't know this party, obviously. Other than that, have there been some big moments?
There was just a few minutes ago, there was a policy motion that was passed overwhelmingly by the grassroots to force the CBC, if the Conservatives ever form government, to exist in the free market. And it was funny, the MPs who spoke to it. So Gerard Deltel spoke against the motion, which is peculiar. Yeah. He said, it's necessary for francophones to have access to Canadian content that way. And, the young man who spoke in favor of it was very francophone. And he said, look, there are plenty of French language resources out there that are fair that we don't have to pay for unless we want to. So that just passed. And then I spoke to Billboard Chris Elston, because a motion failed to pass. It was very close. And it was on affirming the rights of parents to seek counseling and therapy for their children to deal with gender dysphoria that doesn't involve gender-affirming care or surgeries. And that failed because they said it was too divisive, which for me, that reads as we're too frightened to go up against the CBC on that issue.
Well, of course it's divisive. I mean, there couldn't be 2 more different outcomes. That's disappointing. Back to the CBC point for a second. The other day, I went to the CBC's homepage when Iran was just the marchers, and there was a credible report out of Iran that suggested that the regime had murdered more than 30,000 people in 2 days. That is such a shocking number. It's almost hard to process.
It's a small city.
And I went to the CBC homepage and I scrolled all the way down. I couldn't find a single story about that. There were 5 stories about Minnesota and ICE. The top foreign stories was some guy climbed a tall skyscraper in Taiwan. That was the world story. Why are we, where's the Canadian culture at all. Gerard Deltel may have said we need it for Frank to tell the Francophone Canadian stories. They're talking about Minnesota. They're talking about Trump. I unfortunately follow this hour's 22 Minutes, the government comedy channel. They spent about $250,000 taking their entire team to Greenland just to smear Trump, just to have Mark Critch do his Trump impression. Like, it was so cringe. And the whole time I'm thinking, how on earth is any of this in keeping with their mandate under the Canadian Broadcasting Act? So the fact that there's still a debate in this room over should we get rid of the CBC, it feels really obsolete. And why are we even discussing it still? It should be unanimous. But you're telling me it passed?
It did pass.
Okay.
It passed. We also saw policy resolutions that passed on property rights, free speech, on the Jordan Peterson rule,
right,
on professional organizations censoring their people. There was some discussion about whether that's provincial jurisdiction or not, but it should be part of the party ethos, I think,
right,
to protect the free speech of professionals.
Right. You know, one thing that I've noticed, we've got these name tags. You and I are registered. There's also influencers,
yes,
have their own, like, those are online personalities. The Pleb is here, Mark Dixon is here, Jasmine Lane is here. I'm really excited to see the party reaching out to the online media, because social media is the only way you're going to defeat the $1.5 billion here to the CBC.
Well, and we know that the federal government also pays influencers to advance their ideas. They did it around COVID. They do it around specific pieces of legislation all the time. And now these guys are not government funded. They're not funded by the party, but they are advancing ideas. And by the way, this is an overwhelmingly young convention.
Right.
There's a ton of young people.
That's
so
true.
To bring in the influencers, that's pretty smart.
You know, Alan Fryer, who used to be a mainstream media reporter, I follow him on Twitter, he said if I had the choice between a convention of young people,
this is it, or
the boomers who want more free stuff, he knows which side he'd be on. And I thought that was a keen observation. In the past, I remember when I was a youngster, the Reform Party was always knocked at being old people. Yeah. And that was a real knock that the mainstream media would say. Now the Conservative Party is young. If you look at the polls, young people are far more likely to support Conservative than Liberal.
1 in 2.
And yet, that whole line of criticism, the media party would never make it anymore, because it's their friends who are old and entrenched and established. I don't know. I think it's, from what I've just detected today, the conference is good, but I think people still are grieving, in a way, the fact that what was going to be a majority government we all watched for a year was snatched away. And now it might be another 3 years.
Or it could be very soon.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to some conservatives in the know, I won't say who, but there's a real concern that Carney could drop the writ in March to have an election in April, because the Americans are headed to midterms. And so Trump will no longer be outwardly focused on foreign policy, and he'll be inwardly campaigning. And so Mark Carney really only has a small window to be the anti-Trump elbows up guy to round up all those scared boomer votes.
Right. Well, if that comes, we will register again as a third-party election group.
I can't wait.
The reason we do that is because if we didn't, we would be harassed by Elections Canada. You remember that in 2019, I wrote a book criticizing Trudeau called The Libranos, and we had lawn signs promoting the book. They had 3 words on them: buy the book, which was specifically permitted under the law. But Elections Canada chased me for about 6 years. They didn't chase the People's Republic of China for bussing in teenage foreign nationals in the GTA ridings. They were busy going after my book, so I thought, for sure they're going to go after us again, especially our big, beautiful billboard truck. So if there is another election, Sheila, we're going to register as a campaign group. And you know what? I'm totally fine with it, because they're requiring us to do that, to speak candidly and clearly, and we will. And in fact, I'm sort of excited about getting back into a fight. In the last election, Rebel News targeted 2 different districts. One was my own riding, where Yaara Sachs, the self-hating Jew who held hands with Mahmoud Abbas, we had a bit of a campaign there. And also Majid Johari, who was a pro-regime Iranian MP in Richmond Hill. Both of them lost.
Right.
And I think Rebel News deserves a little bit of paternity for that. So I'm ready to fight again. And if the Liberals want to have another run at it, let's give them a run for it.
Well, and to be clear, we're never campaigning for the Conservatives, just campaigning against the Liberals.
Yeah. You know, Rebel News is independent in a number of ways. We don't take any government money, and there's very few media companies who can say that. And also, we hold the Conservative parties of this country to account when we think that they're slipping. We certainly did that in Alberta when Jason Kenney was the premier, who was cracking down hard on churches during COVID times. And remember the Sky Palace lunch he had.
Well, we did it here today when I interviewed Billboard Chris Elston on the gender-affirming care resolution that didn't pass.
And I think that's one of the reasons that we're trusted by our viewers, is that they know we're not just going to echo. I mean, we call Doug Ford a liberal, which is what he is. We criticize conservative, and I think they know it. So some of them are a little scared to be interviewed by us because it's not just going to be softballs. I think that's good positioning. We're right wing, we're conservative, we're freedom oriented, we're all those things, but we're in no one's pocket. And I like Pierre Poilievre, by the way. If I were a party member, I for sure would have voted to give him another shot at things. I think he can win. I think it was a terrible step back that he didn't. I have some ideas for how he might do things differently, but we're not in his pocket. And the fact that they have not yet scheduled a meeting for you to interview him tells me they're a little bit scared of you too, Sheila.
And honestly, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
That's where I want to be, because they know I'm going to ask the tough questions.
And I think our viewers want us to be there too. And we're not taking cheap shots at the Conservatives. We're not being mean or gotchas. We are asking ideological questions, philosophical questions, because there's no point in winning if we're just liberal light.
Right.
And I think Rebel News has helped move the Overton window. Certainly we did during COVID times.
I think we did in Alberta. I think our criticism of Jason Kenney led to a Premier Daniel Smith, who is the leading Conservative thought leader in this country. Bold on guns, bold on medical choice, bold on free speech. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good thing. Yeah.
Oh, we absolutely were. And that was hard because Jason Kenney was a personal friend and certainly an ideological friend. When he was a federal cabinet minister, he was great. But he went from being the federal cabinet minister in charge of religious freedom to the provincial premier in charge of prosecuting churches. Yeah. So we had to tell it like it was, and I think we earned some trust with our viewers. And we'll take that approach into the next election if it's coming this spring.
I think we take that approach every day.
I think we do. Sheila, it's great to see you. Thanks for holding the fort while I was under the weather. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And thanks to our whole team that deployed here, including Tamara Lich, our latest addition to Rebel News. I was just delighted to see her here. Thanks, Sheila.
You got it, boss.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.